had just moved in when the young male model across the hall called the police. He claimed I had fallen in love with him, turned bitter when he rejected me, and had been harassing him ever since, banging on his door, threatening him, and even trying to sexually coerce him. When the police showed up, he pointed right at me and started yelling, "Pervert. You knock on my door every night. You even use binoculars to spy on me. And you've been posting my photos online. I've seen you standing by your window staring at me, always trying to get close. It's disgusting." The neighbors gathered around whispering and pointing at me. Someone even shoved me, calling me shameless. "Women like this are trash. She looks normal. Who would have thought she's a creep?" Under everyone's accusations, I slowly took off my sunglasses, revealing the hollow sockets where my eyes should be. "Officer, how exactly is a blind person supposed to peep at anyone?" My voice was soft, but it cut through the noisy room like a sharp spike. The neighbors who had been shoving and shouting froze. For a moment, the middle-aged woman leading the charge left her hand hanging awkwardly in the air, forgetting to bring it down. Every gaze locked on my face, or rather on the two hollow, empty sockets where my eyes should have been. They were the permanent scars of fire had left me 3 years ago. The officer in charge, a seasoned cop with the surname Wright, paused for a moment before frowning. His voice dripped with impatience. "Cut the act. If you're really blind, a hospital can confirm it." Across the hall, Curtis Lowe's voice faltered for a split second before rising again. "She's lying. She's just trying to get out of this. How could she be blind? Every night she stands by the window watching me." Halfway through his rant, his eyes landed on my empty sockets. His voice trembled, and his words lost their edge. "That's disgusting. Seriously disgusting." His shout stirred the crowd again. "Exactly. She's faking it. People these days will do anything to escape punishment. No lie is too low." A young woman filled with righteous anger even lunged forward, trying to grab my collar. "You're absolutely vile." Officer Wright quickly blocked her. "Hey, nobody moves. Let the police handle this." Turned back to me. The suspicion and disgust in his eyes were completely unchanged. "You're coming with us?" I did not resist. I calmly held out my hands. Cold metal snapped around my wrists. 2 young officers escorted me, one on each side, toward the elevator behind me. The neighbors' curses blurred into a chaotic roar. "Scum of society, get out of our building. Hope you rot in prison." I could not see their expressions. However, I could clearly hear the satisfaction in their voices, kind that came from grinding someone into the dirt. The elevator door slid shut, sealing off the noise outside. One of the younger officers probably knew, could not help but ask in a low voice, "Are you really blind?" I curled my lips into a faint, humorless smile, but said nothing. The other officer patted his shoulder, signaling him to keep quiet. Yet I already knew in their minds. The scales had tipped completely toward that tearful young man. After all, he was a handsome male model and still a student. I was a woman who lived alone and always wore sunglasses. In their eyes, I was strange. To them, it was already decided who the victim was and who the offender was. What those people did not know was that sometimes, what the eyes saw was the greatest lie of all. I, a blind woman, could hear things none of them could. For example, when Curtis accused me, his heartbeat was steady, and there was not a single ripple of guilt or panic. The interrogation room in the police station was lit by a harsh, white fluorescent light. The air smelled faintly of mildew. I sat in a cold metal chair. Across from me were Officer Wright and a female officer taking notes. Name, Evie Lane. Age 28, occupation unemployed. Officer Wright slammed his pen down on the table. The sharp sound cut through the room. "Evie, I suggest you start telling the truth. There's witness testimony and physical evidence. How long are you going to keep denying it?" I tilted my head slightly toward the direction of his voice. My tone was still calm. "May I ask who is the witness and what is the evidence?" "The witness is the victim, Curtis. And the evidence." Officer Wright paused for a moment. His voice was noticeably faltering. "The evidence is still being collected. Don't think denying it will get you out of this." His voice rose, trying to overwhelm me with pressure. "Curtis has already explained everything. You moved in a week ago and started targeting him. You knocked on his door every night at exactly 8 p.m. while he was showering. You used binoculars to spy on him from across the hall. Not only that, you even took photos of him and sold them on overseas websites. This is a serious crime. If you confess now, you can still get lenience." I almost laughed. It was impressively detailed. The time, place, behavior, and motive were neatly arranged. If I were not the one being accused, I might have believed it myself. "Officer, right?" I cut him off. "First, I don't own binoculars. Second, I have no so-called tools. My computer and phone were replaced 3 years ago with a system of devices for the visually impaired. They cannot take photos or display images. I paused for a moment. My voice was slow and precise. Third, and most importantly, I am completely blind. There was a brief silence in the room. Officer Wright's breathing grew heavier. I already told you don't use that as an excuse. Whether you're really blind will be confirmed by a medical examination. Until then, you're the prime suspect. At that moment, the door opened. A young officer poked his head in. Sir, the victim is very emotional. He's been crying non-stop. He'll report us to higher authorities for protecting the suspect. Officer Wright's expression darkened instantly. Got it. He waved the officer away, then turned back to me. His voice was colder than before. Do you understand the pressure we're under because of you? He's a top university student. Case has public attention. If we mishandle it, the entire precinct will be held accountable. I finally understood he cared about the outcome more than the truth. Or more precisely, he was looking for a quick, convenient outcome. The easiest way to get it was for me to confess. So just to avoid accountability, I should admit to something I never did. My question clearly set Officer Wright off. What kind of attitude is that? Do you even know where you are? Officer Wright let out a cold laugh. Let me make this clear. Once you're in here, don't put on airs. And just because you're a woman doesn't mean you're the victim. You won't talk. Fine. We've got plenty of ways to make you talk. The chair screeched harshly as it was shoved back. He rose to his feet and lowered his voice. Lock her up first. Once we get the warrant, search her place thoroughly. I want to see how long she can keep this up. The door opened again. 2 officers walked in and grabbed my arms, one on each side. I did not resist. The moment Curtis called the police, I already realized that this was not a misunderstanding. It was a setup. Since they dared to go this far, they must have already prepared the evidence. Next, they would search my apartment, things that were never there to begin with. I would be permanently branded as a voyeur and a harasser. There would be no way to clear my name, unless I tore this trap apart first. The cold iron door slammed shut behind me with a heavy echo. I was locked in a temporary holding cell. The room was small. There was only a hard cot and a toilet. The air smelled of disinfectant mixed with stale dampness. I traced the wall slowly, found the bed, and sat down, listening quietly to the sounds outside. Footsteps echoed up and down the hallway, mixed with deliberately hushed whispers. That's the sicko who was spying on people. She looks normal. Didn't expect something this disgusting. I heard she's blind, probably faking it. Who knows? Either way, she's done for. Their voices were like fine needles piercing into my ears one by one. I had long been used to darkness. However, for the first time, it felt cold enough to cut. About 2 hours later, the metal door opened again. It was Officer Wright. He was holding a transparent evidence bag. Steps were noticeably lighter. He waved it in front of me. Evie, take a look at this. Then, as though remembering I could not see, he scoffed and answered his own question. We found this under your windowsill. A pair of military-grade binoculars. There was barely concealed triumph in his voice. And this, another evidence bag, hit the table with a soft plastic rustle. A digital camera. It's full of photos of Curtis taken from every angle. Filthy stuff. So, is there anything you'd like to say now? I did not respond immediately. Deep down, a storm was already raging. That was fast. The evidence was already perfectly in place in such a short time. Officer Wright noticed my silence and assumed I had nothing left to say. He pulled over a chair and sat across from me, his tone suddenly shifting into something almost persuasive. Evie, you're still young. You're not without options. Why go down this path now that the evidence is all here? Denying it won't help. If you confess early, I might be able to put in a good word for you and get you a lighter sentence. Statement was pushed in front of me. The sound of paper scraping against the table was sharp and clear. Go on, press your fingerprint, and this will all be over. I could tell from Officer Wright's tone that he was not taking this seriously. He did not care about the truth. He only cared about closing the case. I slowly lifted my head and faced him. Officer Wright, if I press my fingerprint, does that mean I'm admitting to all the charges? Of course. Including voyeurism, harassment, and distributing obscene images. That's right. Multiple charges combined. Enough to put you away for a few years. I paused for a moment. My voice dropped slightly. My name will be forever tied to voyeur and sexual harasser, won't it? The impatience was obvious. Now, what's with all the questions? You did this to yourself? I laughed. The sound felt jarringly out of place in the cramped holding room. Is that so? In the next second, I reached out, found the statement, and tore it apart. The sound of paper splitting was sharp in the air. Nothing was left but shreds. Officer Wright froze for a moment. He clearly did not expect that. Have you lost your mind? He shot to his feet. His voice rose sharply. That's resisting law enforcement. Your sentences just got worse. I lifted my head. My voice was steady and clear. I won't confess to something I didn't do. You can fabricate the evidence. I paused for a moment. But if you want me to admit guilt, I'd rather die. The air seemed to solidify. Officer Wright's breathing turned rapid. Fine, fine, fine. He hit the word 3 times. His voice shook with anger. You've got guts. I'll see how long you can keep this up. He stormed off and shouted into the hallway. Someone get in here. Cuff her. File for formal detention. I want to see how long she lasts. Within seconds, 2 officers rushed in. They yanked me off the bed roughly. Cold handcuffs snapped around my wrists. Again, they were tighter than before, with the metal biting into my skin. Was shoved forward, stumbling as I was let out. Then my phone rang. The flat, mechanical tone of a blind access phone cut sharply through the hallway. One of the officers moved to decline it. I said, "Let me take it." My voice was calm, too calm for someone being dragged away. The officer hesitated for a moment. "Take what move?" Officer Wright barked impatiently. I said evenly, "If this call delays the result you want, you'll deal with the consequences." That made him pause. In the end, the phone was placed in my hand. I felt for the button and answered. A cold, distant female voice came through. "Ms. Lane, the car is parked downstairs. Your legal representation is walking into the precinct right now. ETA is 30 seconds. The voice belonged to Eleanor, crisp, unfeeling, and sharp enough to cut glass. "Understood," I replied, my voice an undisturbed pool of water. I pressed the end call button, feeling the satisfying tactile click beneath my thumb. I held the phone out. The young officer snatched it back, his breathing slightly elevated. Beside him, Officer Wright let out a derisive snort. "Legal representation?" Wright scoffed, the leather of his duty belt creaking as he shifted his weight. "You think a public defender is going to pull you out of this mess? I've got hard evidence, Evie. A lawyer is just going to tell you to take a plea deal." "We'll see," I said softly. They grabbed my arms again, their grips tighter this time, fueled by the irritation of a suspect who refused to play the role of the terrified victim. The hallway air shifted from the damp, mildewed scent of a holding area to the stale coffee and ozone smell of the main bullpen. Then I heard it. The heavy, reinforced glass doors of the precinct swung open. The hinges groaned, but what followed was a sound that commanded absolute authority. The rhythmic, unrelenting click-clack of 5-inch Louboutin heels striking the linoleum floor. The chaotic hum of the bullpen, ringing phones, muttering cops, clacking keyboards, died down almost instantly. "Who's the captain on duty?" a woman's voice demanded. It was Eleanor. Even without eyes, I could picture her. Immaculate tailored suit, a stare that could freeze boiling water, and a briefcase that held more destructive power than a loaded firearm. "Ma'am, you can't just," someone started. "I am Eleanor Vance, senior partner at Vance, Sterling and Croft," she interrupted, her voice slicing through the room. "I am here for my client, Evie Lane. And if the handcuffs are not off her wrists in the next 10 seconds, my firm will be filing a civil rights lawsuit so astronomically large it will bankrupt this precinct and end the pension of every officer involved." The hands gripping my arms twitched. Officer Wright's heavy footsteps approached. "Now hold on a minute, Ms. Vance. Your client is being booked on multiple charges of harassment, voyeurism, and—" "Shut your mouth, officer," Eleanor snapped. The sheer venom in her tone made Wright physically step back. "Did you secure a warrant before seizing property from my client's residence?" "It was in plain view, outside the window." "Under a windowsill is not plain view. It requires a search warrant, which you do not have," Eleanor fired back. Papers rustled aggressively as she shoved a document against someone's chest, likely Wright's. "Furthermore, you are holding a legally blind woman on charges of visual voyeurism without a medical assessment, based solely on the unverified testimony of an emotionally unstable 22-year-old. You haven't dusted the so-called evidence for fingerprints. You haven't checked the metadata. You haven't done police work. You've engaged in a witch hunt." The silence in the room was absolute. Only the hum of the overhead fluorescent lights remained. "Uncuff her. Now," Eleanor ordered, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. A heavy sigh came from the back of the room. "Do it, Wright," a gruff, older voice commanded. "The captain." "Captain, we have the camera," Wright protested, his voice cracking with humiliation. "I said do it. She walks. The evidence is inadmissible until we get a proper warrant and a cyber forensics team on it anyway. Uncuff her." Cold metal scraped against my skin, and my wrists were suddenly free. I rubbed them slowly, feeling the indented red rings the cuffs had left behind. Eleanor's perfume, notes of sandalwood and sharp citrus, washed over me as she stepped to my side. She gently took my elbow. "Are you all right, Evie?" she asked, her tone shifting from absolute warfare to professional concern. "I'm fine, Eleanor. Just a bit of a delay." I turned my head toward the space where Officer Wright was standing. I could hear his shallow, furious breathing. "Officer Wright," I said, my voice carrying through the quiet bullpen. "When you finally decide to look at the metadata on that camera, I suggest you pay very close attention to the focal lengths and the reflection in the window glass. Assuming, of course, you actually care about the truth." Without waiting for his response, I let Eleanor guide me out of the precinct. The ride back to my apartment building was silent. The city outside Eleanor's luxury sedan was a symphony of blaring horns, distant sirens, and the low rumble of subway trains beneath the asphalt. To me, the world was a map of sound and vibration. 3 years ago, the fire took my sight. It took my old life. It took the woman who used to trust what she saw. In the hospital, wrapped in bandages, drowning in absolute darkness, I thought it was the end. But when the visual noise of the world was stripped away, my other senses didn't just compensate, they evolved. Without the distraction of sight, I began to hear the world. I could hear the microscopic changes in a person's breathing when they lied. I could hear the subtle, electric hum of hidden surveillance equipment. More importantly, I remembered everything I used to do. Before the fire, I wasn't just an unemployed woman. I was a senior cybersecurity architect for a private intelligence firm. The fire hadn't been an accident. It was a desperate attempt by a dark web syndicate to silence me after I dismantled their network. They thought burning my eyes out would leave me helpless. They were wrong. They only made me invisible. And an invisible hunter is the most dangerous kind. "We're here," Eleanor said as the car pulled up to the curb. "Evie, why didn't you just let me crush this kid immediately? I have his entire digital footprint in my briefcase. I can have him arrested by morning." "Because Curtis Lowe is just a proxy," I replied, opening the car door. The cool night air hit my face. He's arrogant, but he's not the mastermind. He's a node in a much larger voyeuristic network. If we bust him now, the network scatters. I need him comfortable. I need him to think he's won, so he leads me to the server. "He tried to have you thrown in a cage today," Eleanor warned. "He tried," I corrected gently. "Thank you, Eleanor. I'll call you when I have the IP addresses." I stepped out and navigated the lobby of my building with my white cane. The doorman, who had previously greeted me with a polite "good evening," now remained dead silent. I could hear his chair squeak as he leaned away from me, his breathing shallow. The poison of Curtis's accusations had already infected the building. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. As I walked down the carpeted hallway, the heavy silence was palpable. Behind the wooden doors, I could hear the muffled sounds of televisions being muted and footsteps approaching peepholes. My neighbors were watching me. I stopped perfectly in front of my door. Across the hall was Curtis's apartment. I turned my head toward his door. Through the thick wood, my heightened hearing picked up the faint, rhythmic clicking of a mechanical keyboard and the low, muffled drone of a high-end cooling fan. He wasn't crying. He wasn't a traumatized victim. He was working. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, locking the deadbolt and slipping the chain into place. My apartment was completely dark. I had never bothered to buy light bulbs. Why pay for electricity you don't use? I dropped my cane into the umbrella stand and walked perfectly through the living room, sidestepping the coffee table with muscle memory. I reached the back bedroom, the one I had converted into my sanctuary. I sat in the ergonomic chair in front of my desk. My fingers brushed over the cool metal of my specialized Braille keyboard. I tapped the spacebar. The room hummed to life. The massive server rack I had installed in the closet whirred, fans spinning up to cool the processors. I didn't need monitors. Instead, an earpiece resting on the desk beeped. I slipped it into my ear. "System online. Welcome back, Evie." A synthesized voice chimed in my ear. "Status report on local network sniffer," I commanded, my fingers flying across the Braille keys at blinding speed. 3 active hidden IP cameras detected within a 50-foot radius. "Traffic is heavily encrypted, routing through a proxy server in Eastern Europe," the system replied. I smiled in the dark. Curtis wasn't just a model. He was a content aggregator. He rented apartments in high-end buildings, set up hidden cameras in the vents, smoke detectors, and fire alarms of neighboring units, and sold the live feeds to the dark web. He preyed on single women. When I moved in a week ago, my localized RF scanners immediately detected the transmission spikes coming from my own bathroom vent and bedroom ceiling. I didn't remove the cameras. Instead, I fed them a continuous, pre-recorded loop of an empty, dark apartment using a localized signal jammer I built. Curtis must have realized his cameras in my apartment were returning dead feeds. He panicked. He couldn't break in to fix them without risking getting caught, so he decided to force me out. He fabricated the harassment story, planted the binoculars under my window, and bought a dummy camera, loading it with photos of himself. It was a preemptive strike to ruin my credibility. Who would believe a creepy, stalking blind woman if she suddenly claimed to find cameras in her apartment? It was a smart, ruthless move, but his fatal mistake was assuming I was just a civilian. "Begin decrypting the proxy traffic," I ordered. Run a brute force dictionary attack on his local router. Use the packet captures from yesterday. Working, the system hummed. I leaned back in my chair, closing my useless eyes. Curtis's heartbeat during the confrontation had been steady because he was a sociopath. He felt no remorse for destroying a life, only the adrenaline of the game. Tomorrow, the game was going to end. The next afternoon, a heavy knock echoed through my apartment. I walked to the door and listened. Heavy, uneven breathing. The smell of cheap aftershave and sweat. It wasn't the police. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. Through the narrow gap, I heard Curtis's voice. It wasn't the trembling, victimized tone he used with the police. It was low, venomous, and dripping with smug satisfaction. "They let you out," he sneered. "Must have found a pro bono lawyer desperate for a case. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts, psycho." "Hello, Curtis," I said evenly, staring blankly ahead. "You're a joke," he whispered, leaning closer to the door crack. "The whole building wants you gone. The landlord is drafting an eviction notice right now. You think you can just move in here and creep on people? You're disgusting. A broken, blind freak." I didn't react to his insults. I listened to the microscopic sounds. His heartbeat was slightly elevated now, excitement. He was getting off on the power trip. "Curtis," I said softly. "The camera the police found. It's an older model, a Nikon D3500, if I'm not mistaken." His breathing hitched for a fraction of a second. "What do you know about it? You can't even see." "I know that cameras have unique serial numbers," I continued, my voice conversational, almost pleasant. "And I know that when a digital camera takes a photo, it embeds metadata into the image file. Time, date, shutter speed, and the serial number of the device." The hallway was dead silent. I could hear his heartbeat accelerating. Thump thump, thump thump. "If I were a betting woman," I whispered, "I'd bet that when my lawyer forces the cybercrimes unit to run a forensic audit on that SD card, they're going to find out those photos were taken weeks ago, long before I ever signed the lease for this apartment. And I'd also bet that the reflection in the window glass in those photos won't show a blind woman with binoculars. It'll show the actual photographer." "You're bluffing," he hissed. But the tremor in his voice was real this time. "Am I?" I tilted my head. "The police will trace the camera's serial number back to the point of purchase. Did you pay with cash, Curtis? Or did you use a credit card? Did you wear a mask when you bought it? Because if you didn't, there's CCTV footage." "Shut up," he growled, rattling the door against the chain. "You shouldn't have involved the police, Curtis," I said, my tone finally dropping its polite veneer, becoming something cold and sharp. "You brought a spotlight onto yourself. And predators who live in the dark don't survive in the spotlight." I shut the door in his face, sliding the deadbolt home. Through the wood, I heard him stand there for a long 10 seconds, his breathing ragged, before he practically ran back to his apartment, his door slamming shut. I walked back to my computer room. "System," I said. "Did we capture that audio?" "Affirmative," the AI replied. "Audio recorded in high definition." "Good. Status on the router decryption." "Decryption successful. We have root access to the local network of apartment 4B. "Excellent." I smiled. "Download his entire hard drive. Every video, every transaction ledger, every client email. Then set a trigger. When the download reaches 100%, initiate a factory reset on his servers and wipe his local drives clean." Executing. Now, Curtis was on a clock. And based on his reaction at the door, he was about to make a desperate mistake. Night fell. The city outside quieted down to a low hum. My apartment remained entirely dark. I sat in my living room armchair, a cup of lukewarm tea in my hands, waiting. At 2 a.m., the subtle shift in air pressure told me what I needed to know. The lock on my front door clicked. It was a faint, metallic sound, a lockpick. I didn't move. The door opened slowly. The hinges, which I had deliberately oiled the day I moved in, made no sound. But I could hear the faint scuff of rubber-soled shoes on the hardwood floor. I could smell the adrenaline and sweat radiating from the intruder. Curtis. He had realized his mistake. He knew if the police investigated the camera deeply, his framing attempt would backfire. He needed to plant something undeniably incriminating in my apartment, or worse, silence me permanently and make it look like a suicide out of guilt. He crept into the living room. He didn't turn on his flashlight. He knew I was blind. He assumed the dark gave him the advantage. He assumed wrong. The dark was my domain. He took 3 steps toward the bedroom. "You're stepping on my rug," I said aloud. A sharp gasp. A stumble. He spun around, trying to locate my voice in the pitch black. "Who's there? Where are you?" he whispered frantically, his bravado entirely gone. "I'm sitting right in front of you, Curtis. About 8 feet away." I heard the metallic snick of a switchblade opening. My enhanced hearing tracked the sound perfectly to his right hand, held at waist height. "You crazy bitch," he breathed. "You're sitting in the pitch dark." It makes no difference to me, I replied, taking a slow sip of my tea. But you're at a severe disadvantage. Tell me, Curtis, did you come here to plant more evidence? Or are you just going to kill me? I'm going to fix my problem, he snarled. He lunged forward, but I was already moving. I didn't need to see him. I heard the rustle of his jacket, the squeak of his shoe pivoting, the air displacement as he swung. I ducked smoothly beneath the arc of his arm, sweeping my right leg out. My foot connected with his shin. He crashed to the floor with a heavy thud, the knife clattering out of his grip and skittering across the wood. Damn it, he yelled, scrambling on the ground. I walked over to where the knife had stopped, casually kicked it under the sofa and took a few steps back, leaning against the wall. Your servers are empty, Curtis, I stated casually. He froze. I could hear his lungs stop pulling air. What? While you were busy trying to pick my lock, my system bypassed your firewall. I downloaded your entire client list, the IP addresses of every hidden camera you've installed in the city, and your cryptocurrency ledgers. Then I wiped your drives. The backups, too. You're lying, he screamed, his voice cracking into a hysterical pitch. He scrambled to his feet. You're a blind, unemployed freak. You don't know anything about hacking. Like I said, my voice turned to ice. Sometimes, what the eyes see is the greatest lie of all. Suddenly, the blinding glare of police tactical flashlights pierced through the open front door, illuminating the living room. NYPD. Nobody move. Drop to the floor now. Multiple officers swarmed into the apartment. Curtis, blinded by the sudden light and panicked out of his mind, tried to run toward the fire escape. Two heavy officers tackled him to the floor, pinning him down as he thrashed and screamed. Through the chaos, the familiar click-clack of high heels approached. Evie, are you unharmed? Eleanor asked, stopping beside me. Perfectly fine, Eleanor. Did you bring the captain? I did. Heavy footsteps approached. The captain of the precinct cleared his throat. Behind him, I could hear the distinct, nervous breathing of Officer Wright. Ms. Lane, the captain said gruffly. Your lawyer provided us with a rather extensive data dump an hour ago, outlining a massive illicit surveillance ring operated out of the apartment across the hall. Did she? I smiled faintly. How convenient. Get off me. Curtis shrieked from the floor as the cuffs ratcheted around his wrists. She's the crazy one. She attacked me. She hacked me. She's a psycho. Shut up, kid, the captain barked. We've already got a team tearing your apartment apart. We found the proxy servers in the false wall behind your closet. And we found the receipts for the dummy camera you planted. Curtis went dead silent. The realization that his life was over finally crushed the air from his lungs. Take him down to holding, the captain ordered. And put him in the isolation cell. Guys like him don't do well in general population. As they dragged a sobbing, defeated Curtis out the door, the hallway filled with the murmurs of the awakened neighbors. The same people who had spat on me yesterday were now whispering in horror as they realized the handsome male model had been secretly recording them in their most private moments. I turned my head toward the heavy, nervous breathing nearby. Officer Wright, I said. He flinched. I heard the rustle of his uniform. Yes, ma'am? His tone was vastly different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the sheer terror of a man whose career was hanging by a thread. You told me earlier that people these days will do anything to escape punishment. That no lie is too low, I said softly, stepping closer to him. You were right, but you forgot one crucial thing about being a detective. What's that? He swallowed hard. Evidence tells a story. But if you only look at what's easy to see, you'll be blind to the truth. I raised my hand and slowly removed my dark sunglasses, exposing my ruined, empty sockets to him once more. And being blind is a terrible excuse for not doing your job. Officer Wright didn't say a word. The captain practically shoved him out of the apartment. My office will be in touch regarding the civil suit against the department, Captain, Eleanor called out smoothly as they left. She turned to me. Well played, Evie. Apollo is finally off the board. He was a small fish, Eleanor, but his client list will give us the bigger targets. I slipped my sunglasses back on. Are you going to stay in this building? She asked, looking around the dark apartment. No. My work here is done. I walked back toward my bedroom, where the servers were still humming happily. I'll pack my things in the morning. We have a dark web to burn. I couldn't see the expression on Eleanor's face, but I could hear the sharp, satisfied smirk in her voice. I'll have the car ready. The door closed, leaving me alone in the comforting, familiar dark. I touched the scars around my eyes. The fire 3 years ago had taken my sight, leaving me in an eternal night. But they forgot one thing. In the dark, the monsters can't see me coming either.